The island of Sodor, like a lot of islands, has been around for a long time. And like other islands, it has nice green fields and sandy yellow beaches. But it also has windmills and coal mines, and docks where goods and visitors to the island come and go. And like all islands, the island has its own set of tales. Who's that puffing down the line? Why, it's Thomas! Hello, Thomas! Oh, hello there. Welcome to the island of Sodor. Tales from the island of Sodor. None of the engines and staff were happy at the base since Ivo Hugh's accident a few days ago. It was nearing the end of the day, and Duncan was arranging the last trucks for the last train of the day, bound for Crovan's Gate. Luckily, Bob was busy elsewhere, but that didn't stop the Scottish engine from grumbling. That bossy little... Calm down, Duncan. But I have to agree with you. That Bob just can't stand the idea of someone else doing one of his jobs, said Duncan's fireman. I know. I honestly feel sorry for his driver. I can't even imagine having to deal with that on a daily basis, said Duncan's driver. Indeed. I'm just glad we'll finally have a break from him once we take this train and... But before he could finish his sentence, Bob rolled up.
Everything seems in order. Shame I can't take it, but someone with experience has to look after the Red One while you're gone.
Bob! Scolded Bob's driver.
What?
Asked Bob. Before an argument could ensue, Duncan's driver moved him off so he could refill his tank. Soon, Duncan's water tank had been refilled, and he and his crew set off to collect the train. Soon we'll be out the field with the last train of the day. Then, we won't have to deal with that little bug for the rest of the... Then, Bob's horn echoed through the base.
Hey, slow down! You're going too fast!
He shouted. Duncan's driver was startled by this. He jostled the brake lever, causing Duncan to stop and start so suddenly that his front wheels came off the rails. Are you kidding me?
Again with you civilians,
huffed Bob. But Duncan wasn't having it.
That was your fault. Your shouting startled my driver, causing this,
snapped Duncan. But Bob just huffed.
Well, your driver should have been...
All right, that's enough, said the manager, who had seen everything. How's the damage? He asked after Duncan's crew had finished their examination. He's fine. He just needs to get back on the rails, which will take some time, explained Duncan's driver. The manager sighed. Well, that's just great. I guess we'll have Why doesn't Bob take it? Interjected Duncan. Everyone was surprised.
Wait, what?
Asked Bob. Duncan gave a sly look. Yeah, I mean, you do say you're the most experienced out of all of us, said Duncan. Is that so? Said the manager, looking suspiciously at Bob. Yes, replied Duncan. So, he should be able to take the train with no trouble at all. I don't think that's such a good idea, said Bob's driver.
Yeah, plus, I need to stay here and keep you civilians in check,
added Bob. But Duncan was persistent. Oh, come on now. You've been lecturing us about how you have more experience than us, and how you know how to handle things both properly and safely. So, you should be able to handle a job like this with no trouble at all, right? Said Duncan, gesturing to his crew. His driver took note of this. Yes, of course, said Duncan's driver. Bob was about to respond, but he couldn't think of anything. The words raced round his exhaust vents. Well, Duncan, that's an interesting proposition, but as Bob said, he's needed here, and
We'll do it!
interjected Bob. Everyone, aside from Duncan, was surprised. Bob, like the manager said, we're needed here. Plus, I really don't think that this is such a good idea.
Oh, come on! Driver, manager, I know more about this cargo. Plus, it'll take a while for Rheneas? Whatever, to get here, given his age.
I don't know.
Oh, come on! I'm more qualified, and I can do it in a safe and proper manner.
The manager sighed and realized he had no other option. The train was due out, and Bob was the closest engine, as Rheneas was on the other side of the quarry. Okay, fine, he said. Soon, Bob was coupled up to the train. The guard blew his whistle, and he and his driver set off. I really don't think this is such a good idea. I mean, it's been years since you left the base. Bob just rolled his eyes.
Nonsense! Besides, all the points and signals have been set for us, so there's no problem.
But,
Come on! We've got to get going!
ordered Bob. His driver just sighed and decided it was best not to argue. Duncan and his crew could only sigh with relief as they left. Finally, some peace, sighed Duncan. His driver and fireman could only agree. Meanwhile, Bob and his driver were out on the main line.
We'll be at Croven's gates in no time,
said Bob, but his driver was still anxious. I still don't think that this is such a good idea. I mean, we don't even know the full route, or the correct places to stop. And...
Oh, pipe down, driver. We'll be fine,
huffed Bob. The trucks, on the other hand, were cross. They, like the two steam engines and their crews, were also sick of Bob's fussing, and were initially, like Duncan, glad to have a break, but now were cross. That would no longer be the case.
Boys, I think it's time we teach our dear Bob a lesson,
said the first truck. The other trucks agreed. They quickly started to devise a plan. Things went well until they arrived at the hill. Hold back! Hold back! Said the trucks as they allowed their brakes to slip on. Bob could feel the weight on his coupling.
Shape up! I'm an MOD engine, and you'll treat me and my driver with respect,
shouted Bob. I really don't think shouting at them is such a good idea.
Stow it, driver! More power!
Groaned Bob. The driver sighed and did as he was told. The trucks snickered. You heard him, boys, said the first truck. The trucks released their brakes and surged into Bob, pushing him down the hill, catching both the electric engine and his driver by surprise.
Hey, stop that! That's an order!
Cried Bob, but the trucks took no notice. Guard, brakes, now! Cried Bob's driver. The guard in the brake van did just so. Eventually, they managed to slow down. We're doing it, said Bob's driver.
Good! Now we can... Oh no,
said Bob. His driver looked ahead. The signalman had seen what was going on and had switched the points for them to go into an emergency siding. They were slowing down, but it wasn't slow enough. Luckily, no one was seriously hurt, but Bob had smashed through the buffers and was now stuck in the lake.
Oh, that wasn't meant to happen,
groaned Bob. No, it wasn't. I knew this was a bad idea, and now look what's happened, scolded Bob's driver. Bob sighed. His body was dented, and he was in need of serious repair. Bob's driver went for help, while his guard went down the line to set the detonators. While they did that, Bob could only feel sorry for himself.
Oh, this is all my fault. This likely would have happened if I didn't make so much of a fuss. Why did I have to distract Ivo and his crew, causing the accident?
So that's what really happened, said a voice. Bob stopped. He knew who it belonged to. Some of the workmen, Renius, Duncan, and their crews, have told me about your fussing after you left. Bob looked down at his buffers. I know you don't want a repeat of what happened, but things are different now. So you have to have a little trust in both the engines and their crews. They know what they're doing. Plus, they've been on this island longer than you, said the manager. Bob just sighed. Soon, the workmen set to work to put Bob and the unhurt trucks back onto the rails. Rusty took the trucks and what cargo that was salvageable down to Croven's gate. Leaving Bob in the sidings, waiting to be towed back to the base for repairs, with only his driver for company. It was getting late when Bob heard the sound of an engine approaching. It was Ivo Hugh. The Ministry of Defense engine was a bit surprised by his arrival. The red tank engine switched tracks and buffered up to Bob. Both engines and crews were silent as they made their way back to the base. When they arrived at the base, Ivo Hugh shunted Bob into his shed. He was uncoupled from Bob, and Bob's driver got out of his cab. I hope this accident has taught you something, he scolded. Then he set off for home, as an inspector came to examine Bob. Ivo Hugh and his crew were just leaving when Bob spoke up.
Thank you,
said Bob meekly. Ivo Hugh and his crew smiled.
You're welcome,
said Ivo Hugh. An awkward silence fell before Ivo Hugh's driver spoke. Pardon me for asking, but why did you make so much of a fuss about us doing things both properly and safely? He asked. Bob looked down at his buffers and sighed.
This isn't the first time I've received help. Long ago, I was the only engine working at the base. But as time went on, the stress of working here was taking a toll on my engine. The workmen did their best to fix me, but it kept on failing. Eventually, despite me being very much against the idea, for the same reasons I didn't want you lot working here, the manager arranged for another engine and crew to come and help us. While I wasn't too thrilled about it, I was glad I was getting some help. The engine in question was a newer electric engine named Andre. He and his driver were a pleasant pair. But once they started work, that didn't matter, as those two proved to be very inexperienced. How they managed to slip through the cracks, I will never know. As my engine needed more attending to, Andre and his driver were tasked with handling the more strenuous and dangerous tasks. Me and my driver were very skeptical about this, but there was little we could do, due to the tight schedules and Andre and his driver being the only ones available. We tried mentoring them, but it was difficult being constantly in and out of the workshop. But eventually, aside from a few slip-ups, things seemed to work out. But soon, my fears were justified. One day, some vans full of munitions needed to be shunted. I was going to move them, but my engine ended up failing again. So, Andre offered to take them.
I can take it, Bob.
He said, "No, Andre, I'll do it," and...
Oh, come on, Bob. I know we've had a few slip-ups, but please, let us do this one. Besides, the manager does not want you straining your engine too much, and those vans are very heavy.
He said. I sighed and looked at my driver, and the both of us agreed. Andre made his way to the vans. A little while later, we heard a massive bang. What was that? I cried. Suddenly, my engine came to life, and me and my driver rushed to the scene of disaster. There was a massive crater, and in it was what was left of Andre and his driver. After an investigation, it was determined that the cause of the accident was due to Andre and his driver's lack of experience on safety practices, as Andre's driver had caused Andre to bump into the vans and failed to make sure that all the brakes had been released. So, when they tried to move them, one of the vans ended up scraping along the rails, which caused a spark, and...
Bob stopped. Ivo, Hugh, and his crew were in shock. Bob continued.
Despite what the investigation said, I still felt responsible in a way for what happened. So since then, I decided to work even harder, despite my issues, as I didn't want the same thing to happen to anyone again. I didn't want another engine and crew getting hurt because I couldn't do the work.
He finished. Ivo Hugh and his crew were at a loss for words. Silence fell for a few minutes until Ivo Hugh's fireman spoke. Well, I'm sorry for what happened, but you have to understand, we're not like Andre or his driver. We are very much experienced and know just what to do. Indeed. I mean, heck, out of all of us here, Duncan and Renius have the most experience, given how they worked here before the MOD took over, said Ivo Hugh's driver.
And don't forget, been through 2 world wars,
interjected Ivo Hugh. Oh, yes, that's right, said Ivo Hugh's driver. Bob could only sigh, but deep down, he knew that the 3 were right.
Look, I know that you are worried, but don't worry. We have several years of experience on both our hands and buffers, and despite what you hear, we are very responsible and dependable, especially when it comes down to dangerous cargo.
Bob could only look down at his buffers. Nothing more was said, and Ivo Hugh and his crew left. Leaving Bob with a lot to think about. The next day, Ivo Hugh and his crew made their way back to the base. After it was revealed what had actually happened, Mr. Percival had decided to allow them to return to the base to redeem themselves. When they arrived, Renius, Duncan, the crews, and the manager were waiting for them. Alright, you lot have another busy day ahead. Thankfully, our workers managed to fix Bob in record time, so he'll be able to help, said the manager. Duncan groaned. Just then, Bob pulled up.
Alright, civilians, best we get to work. Renius, the manager wants you to move those trucks of gunpowder to that siding over there,
he said. The steam engines, their crews, and even Bob's driver were taken aback by this. You sure? I mean, aren't you worried that we won't do it safely or properly or cause some random accident? Interjected Renius. Bob sighed.
No.
But
now get moving! Chop, chop!
He ordered. With that, Renius and his crew rolled away. That was a bit out of character for you, said Bob's driver.
Well, I decided that maybe I should stop fussing and try to give these, engines and crew a chance and trust them,
said Bob. He looked over at Ivo Hugh. The young engine and his driver and fireman smiled. Over the next few days, things went much smoother at the base. Bob kept his fussing to a minimum, and there were little to no squabbles. At least not with either Renius, Ivo Hugh, or their crews. But overall, things went well. And Ivo Hugh seemed to notice Bob seemed a little less stressed than usual. A few days later, Mr. Percival came to the base. Good news! Sir Handel has been repaired, and, given what I've been told and seen from you and your driver and fireman, you have indeed redeemed yourselves. So that means you can go back to your usual work, he said. Ivo Hugh and his crew were pleased. But then, Ivo Hugh's face fell as he looked at Bob. Bob sighed.
Don't worry, you're always welcome back whenever we need help,
he said. Ivo Hugh smiled.
Thank you,
he said.
Yeah, don't mention it,
grunted Bob.
Driver, shall we get back to work, please?
Sure thing, said Bob's driver. With that, the two engines and the crews went back to work. Well, that explains your demeanor today, said Bob's driver.
Yes, but that young engine and his crew did have a point, and after spending the night thinking about it, I decided that it would be best if I stopped with all the fussing, or else there would be more, delay and confusion,
said Bob. His driver smiled. Well, at least you seem a little less stressed than normal, which I think is good for your engine in the long run, he said. Bob could only agree.
Yes, well, anyway, let's get down to the basement and see what that Pete guy wants this time, he said. Quite an odd fellow.
He may be, but he's part of the reason why the MOD is keeping this base operational. Bob couldn't argue with that.
Still, he seems very odd, especially when he interacts with me,
said Bob. I suppose so, but then again, I think it's best not to question it, for now at least. He's likely just some odd guy.
Indeed,
said Bob. With that, his driver punched in the code, and the door opened up. And wheel turn by wheel turn, the electric engine and its driver rolled forward and into the shadows of the MOD base.